It began on a quiet summer afternoon in Rome, but what unfolded inside the Apostolic Palace would shake the faith of millions. The marble halls of the Vatican were still echoing with the celebrations of Pope Leo XIV's historic inauguration. Just weeks earlier, May 8, 2025, the day the cardinals, after 4 ballots, entrusted the keys of Peter to Robert Francis Prevost. The world had seen the Grand Mass in St. Peter's Square on May 18th. More than 200,000 souls gathered under a sunlit sky. Yet, no one knew that heaven itself was preparing a sign. On May 24th, Pope Leo XIV named Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle as his successor in the Suburbicarian See of Albano, a role of deep symbolic weight, placing Tagle closer than ever to the heart of the Church's governance. June 5th came with another bold move, a Chinese auxiliary bishop appointed, bridging a fragile accord between Rome and Beijing. By June 13th, the Holy Father declared Carlo Acutis would be canonized on September 7, 2025. And still, the air in the Vatican seemed charged with something unseen. July brought change after change. A new head for the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. A revival of the long-abandoned summer residence at Castel Gandolfo. But on that day, the day of the mysterious moment, Cardinal Tagle was seated among fellow prelates in a small candlelit chamber of the palace. The meeting was private, unannounced. Witnesses recall that the Pope himself entered, smiling, faintly, carrying a weathered parchment sealed with an ancient crest. No one spoke as he laid it on the table. The text was in a script older than Latin, a language of the desert prophets, one that scholars say has been dead for over 2,000 years. The Pope looked to Tagle and quietly asked him to read. Those closest to him swear his eyes widened, not in fear, but in a strange recognition. He began to speak, slowly at first, then with a rhythm that was not his own. The words flowed like a river from his mouth, a language he had never studied, never heard, never learned, yet each syllable rang with a weight that made the candles flicker. Some of the older cardinals whispered that it was Aramaic, the very tongue our Lord Jesus Christ spoke. Others say it was even older, a heavenly dialect reserved for messengers and of God. One thing is certain. The moment his voice filled the chamber, the Pope's hands began to tremble. Those who were present will never forget the way Leo XIII leaned forward, eyes glistening as if hearing something only heaven could reveal. Outside in the square, the bells tolled unexpectedly, 13 times, though no liturgical hour demanded. Lents. Inside, Tagle's voice grew stronger, carrying phrases that none could translate in full. Yet, every listener felt the meaning burning in their hearts. A warning, a promise, a calling. When the final word left his lips, the room fell into a silence so deep, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Tagle looked down at the parchment and gasped. The script was gone. The page was blank, and in that instant, Pope Leo XIV stood, placed his hand on Tagle's shoulder, and whispered only 7 words. Words that those present have refused to repeat. Some claim it was a prophecy for the Church's future. Others believe it was a direct message from Jesus Christ himself. What happened next would ignite debates, divide scholars, and set the faithful on edge. The air in that chamber was heavy, not with incense, but with something deeper, something eternal. Every man present, cardinal, priest, or papal aide, felt it in their bones. The Vatican, the very heart of the Catholic Church, had just witnessed something that could not be explained by human reason. And yet, not one camera, not one recorder had been allowed inside. It was as if heaven had chosen its audience. Cardinal Tagle's hand still trembled as he clutched the now blank parchment, his breathing unsteady. Pope Leo XIII's eyes, sharp yet filled with sorrow, locked with his. Around them, the cardinals, men of wisdom, men of politics, men of ambition, shifted uneasily in their seats. They all knew. Something had been spoken, but the meaning had been sealed in their hearts, bypassing the intellect, piercing the soul. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the Vatican, a sound, low, metallic, like a gate unlocking after centuries. It reverberated through the marble floors. Several looked toward the door, as if expecting the Swiss guard to rush in. No one moved. Pope Leo XIV raised his hand, and the silence returned. "My brothers!" His voice was slow, deliberate, heavy with an authority that seemed older than his pontificate itself. What you have heard today was not for curiosity. It was not for speculation. It was a summons. A summons. To what? The question hung in the air like a sword. Somewhere in the corner, an older cardinal from Eastern Europe, a man who had survived communist persecution, made the sign of the cross, his lips moving in prayer. Another, younger, one of the popes known. Critics clenched his jaw as if bracing for an unwelcome truth. And then it began. Pope Leo XIV spoke of a great purification, not just of the Vatican, but of the Bride of Christ herself, the Catholic Church. He spoke of wolves wearing cassocks, of whispers in the night from factions that plot not for the kingdom of heaven, but for the kingdom of man. He spoke of a clash of powers coming soon, not in centuries, but in days. Tagle sat in silence, eyes fixed on the crucifix above the chamber door. He knew, though he did not yet understand, that what had flowed from his lips moments ago was the trigger. A message spoken in the ancient tongue that had set something in motion. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, all at once, though there was no wind. One flame went out, just one. A single candle, nearest to the Pope. And in that dimming, the shadow of the crucifix stretched unnaturally across the room, reaching all the way to the feet of Cardinal Tagle. The Pope's voice broke the silence again. "The Lord has spoken in the language of his Son, and the world will soon know why." His tone shifted, almost trembling. "But beware, the enemy has heard it too." The moment he said it, a deep echoing boom sounded from outside. The tolling of the bells. But not the Vatican bells. These were from the Church of St. Anne, just beyond the gates. 13 times again, exactly as it had happened during the reading. Every man present knew what that number meant, the same number that had been whispered in Marian apparitions, the same number tied to the final warnings before great chastisements. And yet, the Pope did not look afraid. He looked resolved. "Luis," he said, turning fully to Tagle, "you must go. Tonight, there are those among us who will not stop until the message is silenced. You must guard it with your life, because it is not just for us. It is for all nations." The room erupted. Some cardinals protested, voices rising in anger. Others pleaded for caution. A few simply bowed their heads in grim acceptance. Then, without warning, the massive wooden doors burst open. The ancient wooden doors slammed against the marble walls. The echo rolled through the chamber like thunder. And in that doorway, figures appeared. Not Swiss guard in ceremonial plumes, but men in black cassocks, faces shadowed, eyes cold, carrying no weapons you could see. Yet the air around them felt sharp, hostile, almost suffocating. The room froze. Every cardinal's gaze darted to the Pope. Pope Leo XIV did not move. He stood tall, his white robes catching the candlelight, his hand still resting on Cardinal Tagle's shoulder. And in that instant, everyone in the chamber knew this was the moment the hidden battle inside the Vatican would step into the light. The leader of the intruders spoke. His voice was smooth, calculated, dripping with false piety. "Holy Father, This message is not for the church. It is a distraction, a danger. We come for the parchment and for the one who read it. Tagle felt the blood drain from his face. The parchment, the same one that had been covered in a language no scholar alive could read, now blank. He clutched it to his chest instinctively, as though guarding a relic of heaven itself. Pope Leo XIV's eyes narrowed, and when he spoke, the chamber shook with a voice that was not just his own. This is the house of the living God, and I will not hand his word to those who serve another master. The air turned electric. Some cardinals rose to their feet. Others backed away as if fearing the confrontation would turn violent. And then, it happened. A sudden burst of wind, impossible in the sealed chamber, tore through the room, extinguishing every candle. The darkness was absolute, until, slowly, an unearthly light began to radiate from the crucifix on. The wall. It was no reflection, no trick of the eyes. The figure of Christ on the cross was glowing with a soft golden fire. Every man present fell silent. Even the intruders froze, their bravado stripped away by a presence they could not command. In that holy light, the Pope's face was illuminated, and his words came like a sword. The bride of Christ will be purified. The wolves will be driven from her gates, and the shepherd will not abandon his flock. The leader of the intruders stepped back, eyes wide, yet still defiant. "You cannot stop what has begun," he hissed. "The factions are already moving. Even now, the keys are slipping from your hands." At those words, something inside Tagle shifted. It was as if the same voice that had spoken through him in that unknown language began to stir again, burning in his heart, rising to his lips. And before he knew it, he was speaking again, the same ancient tongue. But this time, it was not slow and measured. It was urgent, commanding. The light from the crucifix intensified, filling the chamber until the marble walls seemed to vanish in brilliance. Several cardinals fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. The intruders shielded their eyes, some stumbling backwards, unable to bear it. And then, in the middle of this divine radiance, a sound came, not from any man in the room, but from everywhere at once. A voice, deep, clear, unmistakable. The voice of a king. "My church will not fall. The gates of hell will not prevail. And the time is short." The moment it ended, the candles flared back to life as if nothing had happened. The intruders were gone. No door opened, no sound of retreat. Simply gone. The air was still. Tagle collapsed into his chair, unshaking. The parchment in his hands now bore a single line of text, in perfect, clear Latin. He read it, and his breath caught. It was a prophecy, a date, and a place. Pope Leo XIV leaned in, reading it silently, and when he looked up, there was a fire in his eyes that every man present would remember until his dying day. The parchment trembled in Cardinal Tagle's hands, not because of the weight of the paper, but because of the weight of what it carried. That single Latin line, written in a hand no man in the room could claim as his own, pulsed like a heartbeat on the page. The letters seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, as if heaven itself refused to let them fade. Pope Leo XIV read it once, then again, slower, every syllable sinking into his soul like a drop of molten gold. It was not merely a sentence, it was a decree, a heavenly summons. It named a date. October 13th, 2025. It named a place, Fatima, and beneath those words, two more that froze the blood of everyone present. Ultima Visio. The final vision. The Pope closed his eyes, and when they opened again, they glistened with something between awe and holy terror. "Brothers," he said, voice trembling yet unbreakable, This is no private revelation. This is not a curiosity for the archives. This is a warning from the throne of the Lamb. And we have only 60 days. The chamber erupted, cardinals speaking over one another, some invoking the Blessed Mother's apparitions in 1917, others denying any connection, insisting this was the work of overzealous mystics. One, his voice shaking with anger, declared, "If this gets out, the faithful will panic. The church will fracture." Pope Leo XIV slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Silence. He stood, the white folds of his papal cassock flowing like a banner of war, and his voice rose with the weight of centuries. The bride of Christ does not fear truth. The bride of Christ does not hide from heaven's call. If the Lord has chosen to speak, we will listen. If the Mother of God warns us, we will obey. Tagle's heart pounded. He could still feel the echo of that ancient tongue inside him. The same fire that had spoken earlier, now pressing at the edges of his soul, urging him to say more. And in a voice barely his own, he whispered to the Pope, "It is not just for us. It is for the whole world." Leo XIV nodded slowly. "Then the whole world will hear." But before any plan could be made, the heavy wooden doors rattled, and again. This time, it was not the shadowed figures from before. It was Monsignor Pieri, the Pope's personal secretary, his face pale, eyes darting like a man who had seen a ghost. "Your Holiness, it's happening. The signs. Outside." They rushed to the nearest balcony, and there, over the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, the sky had split. Not in lightning, not in storm, but in light. A radiant column piercing the clouds, descending like a spear into the heart of the city. The bells of every church in Rome were tolling, not in sequence, but in unison. On the street below, pilgrims and tourists alike had dropped to their knees, gazing upward. Some were weeping, others crying out prayers in languages from every corner of the earth. And above it all, faint but unmistakable, the outline of a woman, clothed in the sun, her mantle flowing like living fire. Pope Leo XIV gripped the balcony rail. Tagle could see his knuckles whiten. "It begins," the Pope whispered. From behind them, one of the elder cardinals spoke, his voice breaking. "Holy Father, if this is the purification, then the wolves will come with teeth bared. They will not wait for Fatima. They will strike here, in Rome, before the date comes." The Pope turned to him, and for a moment, Leo XIV looked not just like a man, but like a general before battle. "Then let them come," he said, "for the gates of hell will not prevail." At that moment, far below in St. Peter's Square, a cry rose from the crowd, a cry that silenced every voice, every bell, every breath. The woman in the light had raised her hand, and in her palm, something glowed. In her palm shone a single key, ancient, golden, blazing with a light no earthly fire could match. The crowd gasped, the Pope froze, and Cardinal Tagle felt his knees weaken. This was no ornament. This was the key of David, the authority to open what no man can shut, and to shut what no man can open. The light around her grew, swallowing the dome, spilling into the streets, touching every heart in sight. And then, a voice, clear as a trumpet, thundered across Rome. "The bride must be made pure. The shepherds must choose. The time is now." The sky shook. The vision faded. The key was gone. And in that breathless silence, Pope Leo XIV turned to the trembling cardinals and said, "We are out of time. The war for the soul of the Church had begun."